welcome to this very special campaign show that we have here for you at Mirror Now, which focuses on making India malaria free. This is in helping our government and various systems at the local level with this endeavor in spreading awareness about how localities can be helped to reduce the spread of mosquito-borne diseases, better understood as MBDs. And which is why we're calling this campaign Bite Ko Mat Lo Light, in association with Star India, Disney, Facebook, Sony, Mr. Ronnie Screwvala, Malaria No More India, and the Times Group. I'm Seher Zama. 20th of August is the date which is marked across the world as World Mosquito Day. And our focus here is M&M, Malaria No More. Prime Minister Modi's next ambitious mission is to make India malaria-free entirely. And this is by the year 2030. But this was something that was announced earlier last year, before the world drastically changed and was hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic has not just changed our way of life, our everyday functioning, it has altered and stretched deadlines and tasks of our local municipalities across the country, which are usually busy at this time of the year in guiding people on how to combat malaria. And that makes the task all the more difficult this year. But we're keeping faith that we continue to maintain our track record. India, which has seen a reduction of at least 24% in annual malaria cases in the past few years. Let's throw this open to our panelists. We have some very important names with us, some very important brains with us who are actively working as part of this mission, Malaria No More, and are active particularly this monsoon season. And we're in the midst of that season. This is from June to September this year. Let me introduce you all the esteemed names that we have with us right now. Dr. Sanjeev Gaikwad, who's the country director of India Malaria No More. Mr. Uday Shankar, who's the president of the Walt Disney Company, APAC. Mr. Ajit Mohan, who's the vice president and the managing director of Facebook India. Legendary actor, Mr. Kamal Hassan, film director and producer, and more recently under the capacity of being the founder of Makkal, Needhi, Maiam. Mrs. Madhuri Dixit, Nene, Padmashri awardee, Filmfare award-winning actor, an extremely loved and popular personality that we've had here. Blessed to have, India is blessed to have. Dr. Shriram, Nene, cardiovascular and thoracic surgeon and healthcare innovator, constantly looking at how to combine health and technology and increase the outreach. Mr. Ronnie Screwvala, who of course we've known to wear many, many hats, but in his latest avatar right now as the co-founder and the chairperson of upGrad, which focuses on online education. Let me first go to Mr. Uday Shankar with us. Mr. Uday Shankar, as we established this in our opening statement here, that this time, while we talk about the Malaria No More mission, it's also in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. But there is also this sense, I remember when COVID was being spoken about, that this is across the board, this affects everyone. Do you think there is an ill-fated perception as far as malaria is concerned, as something that could only be restricted to slum clusters or hutments?
First of all, I think these are tricky times for the challenge of malaria, because the urgency of the COVID pandemic has played havoc with all kinds of social economic priorities. And malaria, the priority around malaria is no exception, because we do know, as you were saying, that it's a wrong perception that the mosquito-borne disease affects only certain clusters or certain socioeconomic categories. All of us are vulnerable, and we've had a great run in dealing with malaria. And I think Malaria No More has played a very stellar role in that. And we've done a good job. The rate of incidence has come down, and we participated very actively to the Prime Minister's call of eradicating malaria completely. And then a few months ago came the COVID pandemic, and the entire focus of the healthcare machinery and also all the priorities have just got totally diverted, and rightly so, because there is an urgency and criticality of attention, and that can't be undermined. However, it would be wrong that we take our eyes off something where we have built a lot of momentum where we have made a lot of progress, and we must make sure that we find ways to ensure that the priorities are not, we don't slip the ground that we have already built, and that's very
Mhm.
important.
That's of course incredibly important of what you've mentioned here. Dr. Sanjeev Gaikwad, would you like to add to that? Do you think we are right now in a position to still keep the count low? If we have met with a success of 24% reduction in malaria cases in the past few years, are the challenges double this year?
I think this year, the entire situation has been complicated by COVID. I think all of us are struggling with that, and the number of cases are growing up, day by day. And there's one very classic similarity between these mosquito-borne diseases and COVID, namely fever is the predominant symptom. And a lot of fear has been created in people's mind that, if it's fever, it could well be a COVID or something like that. And there are chances that people might not come forward to get tested and seek treatment. So one of the key things that I think we need to reach out to people with is that in case you have a fever, please go and get yourself tested within 24 hours. It could be malaria, and in case it's malaria, it could well be fatal. If it's COVID, well, I think it's all being talked about right now, so I need not say more. And some of the preventive measures, such as spraying or providing insecticide-treated bed nets, or providing testing and treatment services, some of these services have been affected. So it's very important to keep the foot on the accelerator and make sure that the gains are not lost.
Right. So these are a bit of worrisome figures of what you've just quoted here. Mr. Ajit Mohan, if we are aware of the figures that we're looking at this year already reported mid-year, how do you think platforms such as yours at Facebook can help in informing people on just basic precautions?
Absolutely, sure. And the good part about this is malaria is preventable. But obviously, if left untreated, it can be deadly. So our partnership with Malaria No More is really trying to understand how can we work together to build online campaigns that increase the awareness of malaria, but are really relying on individuals and families and communities to get the word out. The message is quite clear. As you pointed out, it is just to point out that you should not take the bite of the mosquito lightly, and that there are fairly simple actions that can be taken to protect yourself, your family, your community. And we're also trying to introduce a few new creative formats. For example, use of AR to make sure that some of these messages can break through the clutter.
Mr. Kamal Hassan, how effective do you feel is home prevention? Does it still remain at a personal level? It sounds something as basic as keeping your surroundings clean, not have stagnant stored water, wearing long sleeves. Do you think to continue to depend of a strategy that works only at an individual personal home level, is that a good enough strategy?
Yes, I think without the individual's participation, nothing will succeed. Whether we go to do satyagraha, war, preparing the country for economic development, or anything at all, including fighting diseases, I think the individual will have to participate. Those governments which have involved citizen participation have succeeded enormously. We'll have to talk person to person. And that's what we are doing, I think, attempting to do right now.
Mrs. Madhuri Dixit, Nene, we've of course known that you also have been involved in the government's program here as far as healthcare is concerned. We've seen you being the face of revitalizing our government's immunization coverage. From that experience that you've had, and in your understanding from that experience, how do you feel that this is a mission which is working on ground as far as malaria is concerned? Where do you think are the spots that need to be filled right now?
Yes, I have been working with the government in Maharashtra on various issues where women and children are concerned, not just urban, but also rural now. I think this is a great initiative, Mosquitoes No More, because through, because this problem is not just about, people in slums or, people in the smaller villages. It's everywhere, even in cities. Even I've got malaria, so I can talk about a personal experience because I had suffered from malaria. Ram got dengue. And so it's very important, to spread the message, spread the awareness, and educate people on how you can use preventative measures. We have to make sure that we create this awareness and keep the education on, despite, because COVID is taking the maximum number of, news things, or people are talking about it a lot, and these kind of things are taking a backseat. So we make sure that we don't do that, and we come out and we keep talking about and educating people about being aware of this and how to prevent this.
Wonderful, absolutely. The persistence with which there needs to be a continuance in this message as far as fighting malaria. Dr. Nene, as a healthcare innovator yourself, how do you think early detection can be encouraged in people today? Because with the pandemic, we'll be looking at this discussion in a very unprecedented different scenario here. Even wanting to get a simple malaria blood test done can be not just a challenge, but an intimidating task at hand. You talk about combining health and technology to scale up outreach. How do you scale up early detection care?
You bring up a great question, because I think data will set you free. And honestly, when I was doing my research for this is not a new battle. At the time of independence, we had 330 million people, of which 75 million people may have been exposed or gotten malaria. And the government's been working on this for years. I have to applaud the recent efforts with the Modi government and with Dr. Gaikwad and his team, in addition to others on a global basis. Now, back to your question, the idea is when and where to act. And I think it comes to three things: awareness, access, and treatment. The idea is that if we can build a network of awareness and treatment vis-a-vis devices and other things, where we can easily either have bots initially as a first round triage, and then secondarily a system connected to the hospitals at different levels, we can carefully triage the patients who really need intervention. The second thing is that, the overall awareness of what to do, which Madhuri pointed out and several of the other speakers have pointed out, is a given. If we can train people socially to respond to these cues and prevent this disease, that becomes remarkable. And then the last thing, which is very important, is malaria is treatable. And if taken care of early and often, it's a combination of a human vector and a mosquito vector, if you think about it. Because if you wipe out the disease in humans, the mosquitoes can't pick it up. And vice versa, if you wipe out the mosquitoes, then they can't do it. And so the idea is that if people are treated for the 7 days with the appropriate medications and they finish their course of medications, we can make a difference. India has come from the 4th largest base of malaria down to almost nothing, and the WHO has applauded us. I think now's the time to consolidate, take our learnings from COVID and use the technology and the manpower and the knowledge to our advantage.
That's brilliant. Mr. Ronnie Screwvala, you've of course heard everyone. Thank you, waiting patiently here. But for an influencer such as you and your current focus with upGrad, do you think that an aggressive fight such as this of Malaria No More can resonate in an online space where in certain terms is still limited, because at the end of the day, it's more about real physical intervention that happens on ground?
So I think firstly, there's a lot been said right now. And I think as Uday started, the most important thing for Malaria No More in 2020 and 2021 is to see to it that we don't reverse a lot of the progress that has been made, because the priorities today have changed. Dr. Nene pointed out some very important facts which can actually make this a centralized approach. But still, at the end of the day, I think the first objective is to see that it does not get reversed. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to meet our goal. Second, I think everyone needs to be aware that this is a very important disease and an important one that we need to all take care of. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having a 2030 goal in the first place, which means we need to go deep, we need to go long, we need to find a long-term strategy for it. Right now, our goal is to get rid of COVID in 2021 because it's an extreme one. But by and large, when you make a 10-year plan I think everyone needs to understand the seriousness with which we need to approach it. Third, I think Dr. Gaikwad very relevantly pointed out that this disease is fatal. And I have to tell you, we work with our Swadesh Foundation in rural India. And this year more than ever, because I've been now much more aware, thanks to Malaria No More, I took that up as one of the initiatives that we did there. And the awareness level, as Dr. Nene mentioned, is very low, and especially in rural India. The prioritization and the awareness level is very low. And we can, have an evolved discussion here. But I think really at that rural level, there's so simple 1 or 2 or 3 steps, and that's what we've kind of done.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Ronnie Screwvala. That's a very significant point that you've made, also tapping into your own personal experience in having worked in rural areas. We're going to take this discussion forward in just a bit. Please stay on with us. Thank you for staying on with us. We've been having a very, very important discussion as far as India's mission to fight malaria is concerned. We're calling it Malaria No More. Dr. Sanjeev Gaikwad, coming back to you here on this, and this is very specifically keeping in mind on the work that the Malaria No More mission has done in high burden malaria states such as, to talk about Odisha, where I believe it has been reduced by at least 80%. Do you think there is a copy-paste formula that can be used in other high-burden, top-priority states such as Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar as well? Do you think there's this one formula which has met with success in one state can effectively work as much across the country?
I think there are some key lessons that can be taken from Odisha which can be applied to other places. One of them is a strong political commitment. And it's not just at the level of the chief minister or the ministers, but even at the level of the directorate and going right down to the district officials, and making sure that there is staff available at the grassroots, positions such as entomologists and so on. And there's continuous focus and a monthly review, preparatory actions before the monsoon. And I think that's how it works. So I think these kind of lessons can be definitely taken to other states.
Right. Mr. Ajit Mohan, because we'll be talking about states with different regional languages, different levels of understanding one particular crisis here. How do you think Facebook can play a role here in reaching out to people in regional languages here as well?
For me, if you think about this conversation, all of the action starts with greater awareness. And therefore, at least as far as this particular campaign is concerned, all of our effort is to make sure that we build that awareness across the country with a particular focus on those states by driving the messages around timely prevention, testing and treatment for malaria. So that's exactly the intent of the campaign.
Right. Mr. Uday Shankar, as you were saying that there is a lot of government funding here, which could be interrupted, or in fact is, as is understood best, is also being diverted to focus on COVID fighting, COVID-19 mission, immediate emergency mission that we have right here. In your understanding on how government funding is allocated and used, do you think that as far as fighting malaria is concerned, that allocation has been interrupted this year?
Look, I don't have any specific information if the fund diversion has already taken place. However, you must appreciate that administrations and authorities are, their muscle memories are geared to respond very actively to immediate crisis. And when you have limited resources, then it does become a big challenge as to how to best respond to that. And that is why, nobody would fault someone who's making a case for diverting resources to tackling the pandemic, because it's nationwide and it's lethal and it's the topmost priority for any leader. We have to make sure that there is that right balance that we all come together to drive towards.
Absolutely. Mr. Kamal Hassan, to you, please. With also your latest undertaking as with M&M, as you mentioned here, with your political outfit and party, to to be speaking about these everyday issues as much?
We have initiated a program from the party called We Are the Solve. That's a rough translation of the Tamil slogan we have raised. And we've, as I had suggested, it is not just lip service. We have actually recruited societal help. Apart from party members, we have volunteers who have come out of nowhere to help us, both financially and physically offer their services at times of COVID. But at the same time, I'll have to agree with the Mr. Uday Shankar when he says that you can't sort of have a focus on one spot and defocus all other probable pandemics that might come. And this has been something that's been troubling the world, the Western population, and especially India for hundreds of years. And we've tried, Dr. Nene will be able to tell you what all we have tried earlier on, 200 years back. They thought it came through the spine, so they started wearing different dresses. And as Madhuri said, they started wearing pants. But basically, it's the time when you're unaware that it strikes. And we always arrogate ourselves to think that we are on the top of the food chain till you look down and see a mosquito feeding on you.
Absolutely. This is Madhuri Dixit, Nene, as you mentioned. This is not just behavioral changes here to prevent the disease, to prevent the mosquito bite, but it's also as much to understand, to take up the treatment in its completion, because this is something that festers in your system. For a while, it can stop showing symptoms, and not to believe that this is the end of the treatment, this is a recovery point, till the doctor says so.
Yes, that's very important, because it's like, you have a lot of people take antibiotics and they leave it halfway, and then you get resistance to the antibiotics, which we see a lot because they get prescribed a lot and people don't complete the course. Similarly, I think with malaria, you have to make sure that you're on it, and till the doctor says, that's it. I mean, this is where you are completely better, and you have to keep taking the medicine, because you cannot just give it midway. It always comes back. And like everybody here is saying that, this awareness campaign has to be continuous. It has to be done with the full commitment, and it has to be ongoing.
Right. Dr. Nene, I want to take up the point of what you'd mentioned earlier as well. Till the vaccine is out, COVID-19 is here to stay. Malaria is perhaps here to stay for a lot, many more years. So the convergence in systems, the intervention tools that we think have worked for COVID should be as much optimized for malaria as well, instead of looking at it as a separate program with double the work, and looking at converging the systems that are already at work.
I think someone already said it, that the key to malaria and reducing it in Orissa, as well as in other places on the planet, was actively going out and chasing it with early detection or testing, awareness programs, and then treating and following through with that. But if you could record that with an Arogya Setu app or something like that, and continually do that, and then you also know who in your local vicinity has it, then you also know, what your risk is, because there's certain areas of India which are endemic and others which aren't. And so your heightened awareness will give you the ability to use further precautions. So I just see this as a time when we need to celebrate our wins, and at the same time consolidate our base and use it all coming together. And I think Malaria No More is one brilliant exercise, which has really affected a lot of changes along with the Modi government. Bill Gates said it in 2018. He said that I see a light at the end of the tunnel, that within one generation, we can cure malaria on the planetary scale.
Right. Mr. Ronnie Screwvala, do you think our learning of dealing with the pandemic accelerated to this point here can even tighten our malaria mission deadline of 2030, that there could be a possibility, a scenario here where we learn how to converge the work that has been done, and we look at tackling malaria much earlier than the slated deadline of 2030, which really seems about far away, a decade ahead?
Yes, I think overall awareness for good health and looking forward has become a very high priority for everyone. I think even if you just look at medical insurance, which is something that we are one of the most underinsured countries in the world when it comes to medical insurance. If you look at these, yes, I think the level of everyone being conscious and aware, COVID has taught us a lot. We have to cannibalize that and see how we can do that for almost all well-beings. Let me give you another example because we've covered a lot here. For example, when we work again in rural, one of the key things we found was visual impairment. Now that's not a fatal disease, but almost 40 to 45% of the people, we're the visually impaired capital of the world. And the only reason for that is because we don't test our eyesight at a very early stage. So I think awareness and testing, and I think what Dr. Nene mentioned by using technology today to permeate that, to take the digital medium and permeate that awareness is going to make a big difference.
On that note, we will have to leave it at that, but thank you so much. This has been such a valuable discussion here. There have been so many big takeaways in all that you mentioned with your experience, with your expertise. We're so glad to have all of your brilliant minds together here to talk to us about this, to spread the message with our viewers and each of your individual platforms here as well, because this is as important as you said, to not lose focus on our other health missions in the face of a pandemic, in the face of a COVID-19 emergency. So most certainly, this further emphasizes the message of Bite ko mat lo light. Thank you so much, all of you, for being with us here.
Bite ko mat lo light. This campaign will help us empower and educate a large segment of our population on malaria, its causes and dangers. Sony Pictures Networks India is proud to partner with this initiative and spread the word that can help all of us be safe and take necessary precautions. I believe there's nothing more important than sharing and imparting knowledge to achieve India's goal of malaria elimination by 2030. Through joint and sustained efforts at the national level, I am certain we will succeed in our commitment towards this cause of preventing and eliminating mosquito-borne diseases in India.